Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am BorderWise and welcome to the basic advanced cannon or advanced projectile system tutorial for From the Depths. Well, it's not the tutorial, it's one of many, but it's one that I'm making, so yay for me I guess. Now, backstory behind this tutorial is, as of recording, we've just been hit with the big APS update for From the Depths, and no one knows which way is up anymore. Well, that's a slight exaggeration, some people are figuring it out, but there's much confusion, there's much strife. So, this little tutorial, and I'm gonna try and keep this short, because advanced cannons are advanced, and so there's no way I'm gonna jam everything to know about them into one video. That would take way too long. This tutorial is aimed both at people who are complete beginners to this game, who don't know which end of an advanced cannon is which, and to more veteran players who are kind of feeling a bit lost at the moment, and like, think of this as a kind of step up to get you used to like how these things work now. And I've been sciencing it over the past few days, and hopefully what I say is helpful. So, first things first, you'll notice that I have arrayed out pretty much every single advanced cannon component there is out on this wee fortress right here, and we're going to go through them first, one by one. This is super basic stuff we're going with. And so, overall advanced cannons now, they're more difficult, but they're also kind of more interesting to build. They're also very expensive, so optimizing them, if you want to keep your costs in playing a campaign down, is quite important. So, let's get into the bits and bobs. So, to start off with, we have here the firing piece. This is the main component for the advanced projectile system. It's where the bullet sits before it gets fired. It's what everything attaches to. Everything connects to this. Basically, you can get away with maybe skipping out on every single other component, but you must have this for it to be an advanced cannon, or at least a functional one. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Here's where you find it. Cost of 100, pretty decent health actually, it's got good armor for an essential component. And things, barrel and mantlets go on the front, inputs and recoil absorbers and connectors go on the sides, gauge increases come off the back, and that's all very well and dandy, essential piece. So, the next is the ammo controller, so that is found here, and this is also essential because it's where you customize the ammunition for these things. So, you hit Q on this and you can set up your shell, and there's lots and lots of shell components which I will probably cover in a different video, because they all, pretty much all of them have their uses. Some are more obviously useful than others, and so yeah, there's a lot to know here. We'll leave that till a later date, but it's suffice to know that you need a controller and customizers in order to make a shell. That's very important. But here we have the connector. These things don't get much love, but they are the cheapest advanced cannon component, and they are useful for connecting certain random bits and bobs to your advanced cannon that you might need, because you can connect autoloaders to them, you can connect recoil absorbers to them, you can connect railgun charges to them, and other things like that. So these are what you pull out if your gauge snake or Tetris. If you don't know what those terms mean, don't worry, we'll get to that. This is what you use when you're stuck on that and you just need one extra bit sticking out in order to jam some more things in. So that's quite handy. I've actually started using them a lot more since the update landed, because I find that they're not strictly needed, but they are helpful. So, moving on. Speaking of gauges, here are the three kinds of gauge, so that's found up here. You have the gauge increase, which, as per the tooltip, increases the size of the firing chamber and the shell gauge, so the more of these you have, the bigger the diameter of the gun of the advanced cannon, and the bigger the shell you can stick in it, which is very helpful. The cooling vent splitter is a three-way connector, so the gauge increaser and the cooling vent, we'll get to that in a second, connect, well, it's a tube, so it connects to each other, only in two directions. This one connects in three, so it's quite handy for, it's like very good for allowing you to split your gauge snake, because it kind of snakes around like a snake inside your main cannon, and it just allows you to essentially connect everything together vis-a-vis gauge increases. which is very useful. It also acts to cool the barrels after firing and allows connections in multiple directions. The cooling thing is a new feature. They just added that as of the time of recording, so that's very nice. These are multifunctional. Never leave home without them. They are also quite expensive. So they cost more than twice as much as a gauge increaser, so really only place these if you actually need them. You don't want to place more of these than you actually need. If you want to connect things together with your gun, you're better off using gauge increasers or even connectors. Okay, moving on to the cooler, this is basically... This does the same thing as the cooling vent splitter, except it's not a splitter, it's just for cooling the barrels after firing. So these things are also very essential and major. You will build your advanced cannons a lot around how fast their barrels cool down, because the faster they cool down, the faster they can fire. Very helpful. And speaking of firing, moving on here, we have recoil absorbers, and they come in 5 different sizes: 1 meter, 2 meter, 1 meter, 2 meter, 4 meter, 6 meter, and 8 meter lengths. And we'll go over the differences between them in a little bit, in about a second or so. And the main thing is, these absorb recoil when the gun is fired. So, absorbed recoil, the way the recoil works now is that your advanced cannon needs to has recoil, and the more recoil it has, the more inaccurate the next shot will be if it's not absorbed or if it's not compensated for by recoil absorbers. So there's two things to think about. Recoil absorption, and I think I can just demonstrate that right here. So, dang it, that won't work. It doesn't show it. We'll get to that in a little bit, but basically, you need these things to keep your gun accurate, because if you have recoil that isn't compensated for, your gun will get progressively more and more inaccurate, which is a bit of a problem. So I think of it as the same way in real life if you fire an automatic firearm. If you don't compensate for the fact that it's bucking around in your hands, the barrel will rise and start spraying stuff towards the horizon, which isn't a good thing. So yeah, so the difference between these different sizes is the smaller ones regenerate the kind of pool of recoil absorption that you have. They regenerate that quicker, and the larger ones have provide a larger pool of absorption. So that'll be demonstrated in the live fire test in a little bit. So you need these things. These are another essential component of making a good advanced cannon. Now we're moving on to the next one. This is the meaty stuff. So this is the autoloaders. And there are two 1 meter sizes of autoloader, and then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different sizes of other autoloader, like bigger than that. So to start off with, you have the regular autoloader, and this is quite straightforward. It attaches to the gun. This is where the shells sit before they go into the firing piece, and where it is loaded into the gun. So the input is way over there. We'll talk about that in a second. But you connect inputs to this, like so, and bullets are fed into the autoloaders, and then into clips. And when the firing piece is clear and it needs another shell, these things will stick another shell in it, which is quite handy for shooting and stuff. So you have the regular autoloader, which functions quite nicely. So this can handle shells up to 1 meter long. So if you go back to the shell customizer, what you get over here is, if I just stick something functional, just frag head, you'll see that there's a shell length here in the customizer. And 1 meter shell rack for this 240mm shell. So, that's a tiny shell, but if we want to make this shell a bit bigger, we'll see the length just keeps climbing up, climbing up, climbing up, climbing up, climbing up, climbing up, and whoop, there's around 250mm now, so quite a jump. Now we need, well, 258mm, let's say. Now you need a 2 meter shell rack, so it won't fit into a 1 meter one, because the shell's too big. And so these work for that, and that goes with all of these. 2 meter autoloaders handle 2 meter shells, 3 meter autoloaders handle 3 meter shells, and 4 meters, 6 meters, and 8 meters. So you can have some truly giant shells in here. A 500mm, 8 meter long shell is by far and away larger than any kind of gun that was ever fired seriously in real life. At least as far as I'm aware. The largest functional guns, I think, were ridiculously big. Not this big. They didn't fire shells 8 meter long, for sure. And speaking of ridiculous, if you want ridiculous fire rate, what you get is a belt-fed autoloader. So, this is a little bit different. For one, regular autoloaders, they connect to stuff on all 4 sides. And that can be clips, which we'll cover over there in a little second. It can be the gauge snake, it can be connectors. Basically, all directions they connect. Belt feds are a little bit different. You'll see, as I pan around here, there's pegs, little green pegs around it. That's where it connects to the things I mentioned before. Connectors, gauge increases, coolers, even the firing piece itself. That little pin on top is the only place you can stick clips in, and you need clips for belt-fed autoloaders, because their whole deal is that you have shells in the clip, they are fed into the autoloader, which can load very, very fast. So you can get, even now, with advanced cannons firing much slower than they used to, you can get very high rates of fire with this. But they cannot load and fire at the same time. So you have the clip, say, helps if I actually stick a clip here. You have a clip, you have an input feeder. This thing will load until the clip is full, and then this will be able to fire. Once this is empty, it can't fire anymore until it's fully loaded again. So, unlike these other autoloaders, which can reload anytime they like, they can keep firing, they can keep shooting, better for continuous rates of fire. So, that's belt-fed autoloaders. Over here, we have a handy little thing, ammo injectors. So, what these do, these are attached to autoloaders, and when the autoloader is destroyed, they eject all the shells from it. They just spit them out. And it does help to have a plan for where those shells go once they're ejected, because they're still volatile. So the reason you want this is because a lot of shell types, particularly fragmentation shells and high explosive shells, are very, very volatile. If the gun gets... if an autoloader is destroyed with shells in it, or even worse, if a clip is destroyed with shells in it, those shells will all explode, and that is can be disastrous for whatever craft is on it. So, in order to counter that, this is one of the things you can use. You could just, when the autoloader is destroyed, not only all the shells in here, because these only hold one shell at a time, all the shells and connected clips also get ejected. And there's even something on the in the shell itself that you could have to fix that. So, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Right here. Come on, where is it? Here we go. Emergency ejection defuse. So what this does is that it's linked to the ejecting system attached to the autoloader and will defuse the shell when it's ejected, making it harmless. That only works when the shells are ejected, by the way. So if, say, the ejector is destroyed first, then that doesn't work. The shells will still blow up. So that combination can help build a very compact advanced cannon, which doesn't cripple your entire vessel when it blows up. So, these are quite handy. I never use them. I really should. There are people who never leave home without them, and they've got the right idea. So, speaking of clips, here we have all the clips, and there's not a lot to talk about. You stick intakes on them, so here's the intake. I probably could have ordered this better, but never mind. Intakes go in here, they feed shells in, the clips feed shells into autoloaders, and from there it's passed on to the firing piece to be fired. So yeah, these are very helpful. So there's two kinds of them. There's the see-through ones, in which you can see shells when they're loaded in, and there's the solid ones. Functionally, they're very similar. The only difference is that, well, as I said, you can see shells when they're loaded in here, so you can tell what kind of shell they are, you can tell how many are in there, and it is quite cool to see them in there. The solid ones, you can't see them. So, why would you ever use one over the other? Well, I would recommend, and the meta thing to do, is to use only ever use solid ammo clips, because two reasons. Firstly, you see the stats for this clip over here, this transparent 1 meter clip. Health 100, armor 7, weight 5. Over here, you have the solid clip, health 100, armor 8, weight 10. So this is quite a bit heavier, but it has slightly more armor, and this clip does not render shells and as such is more CPU friendly. So, if nothing else, save your PC, especially if you use a lot of advanced cannons and they render a lot of shells at once, or if they hold a lot of shells at once, because using these, the shells will all be rendered in-game. And so that will take up CPU cycles and that will cause you to lag a little bit sooner as opposed to using these. And same over here at the other end, health 1000 for the see-through 8-meter clip, 1000, and 1008 and 80. So these are twice as heavy, but these things are healthier for the CPU, and these are also slightly more durable. It just occurred to me that using transparent clips on a lightweight craft is probably a better idea, because this is quite a difference. Particularly when using lots of them. Say, this 4-meter clip, weight of 20, weight of 40. That can add up a lot. In any case, that's what clips for you. Over here we have the input, the intake rather. And I've already talked about this a little bit. This is how you get shells into your gun. So these attach to clips, they attach to autoloaders, but they could also go on the firing piece as well. Now, keep in mind that ammo intakes on the firing piece itself take twice as long to load, because if you go over here, you'll see reload time, blah blah blah, per intake. That's the time it takes for a shell to be delivered to an intake and into whatever clip, autoloader, or firing piece it's attached to. This time is doubled, so if we go... Let's go to 250 for no reason. So, 25.89 seconds for this shell to be transferred from ammo reserves over to an autoloader, or a clip, okay? So that's a long time already. That value is doubled if you stick that on an advanced, on the firing piece itself, so it's about, let's say, that's about, I don't know, 51, 52 seconds or so quite a long time. Which is why direct input fed guns, or diff guns as I call them, they're not the best idea. They have their uses, but they're not great. You will not get a good rate of fire with them if you only stick intakes on the firing piece. But there's other advantages to them, which we will probably get to either later or in another video. For now, let's move on to mantlets. Now, mantlets are what you stick on the front of your gun, or on the firing piece, in order to give it an arc of fire. So there's 5 of them, and going down the list, here we have the Omni Mantlet, and the stats are all there in the tooltip right here. So the Omni Mantlet 1 meter is got the azimuth, or the side-to-side field of fire, is between 10 to 30 degrees, and the elevation is between 10 and 30 degrees. Why is that there twice? I'm not sure why. Guys, need a fix here. Devs. In any case, so that's that, and that's very nice. So that's good if you want even azimuth and elevation. The elevation 1 meter mantlet has less azimuth. So the azimuth field of fire is between 5 and 20 degrees. The elevation is between 20 and 40. So they can aim up and down a lot more. The 3x3 Omni Mantlet has the best azimuth field of fire of any of the mantlets. It's also the strongest. You'll see just how much health this thing has. So here we have 500 health, 20 armor, weight 60, 500, 20, 60, 5000, 28, 540. This is a pretty solid piece of engineering right here. And as we're skipping on ahead, it has so much more health than the elevation mantlet and the AA mantlet, which has actually not much health at all. We'll get to that in a second. So, this is very useful for fixed guns, which need to aim up, down, and sideways, and they can't, not on a turret, so it's very helpful. Never appreciate just how much health this thing had, jeez. The elevation mantlet, which the 3 meter version, is like the elevation mantlet here, but it's about 3 times as tall, and it has much better elevation, so also, it has pretty lousy azimuth movement, so it's between 5 to 10 degrees for the azimuth, between 45 to 65 degrees for elevation. And again, it has the elevation limits posted here twice. Why is that? So, this is the best all-rounder. I tend to find myself using these things the most, simply because it's a nice compromise between aiming up and aiming down. And the opposite of that is the 2-meter tall anti-aircraft mantlet. So when you want to shoot at things that are above you, this is your best option. So, not great health or... well, not great health. This thing can aim almost straight up. Like, yeah, so the azimuth is terrible, between 5 and 5 degrees. And the elevation is between 80 and 100 degrees. And that's the max elevation. Oh no, that's why it's being posted twice. A dir, that's the maximum and the minimum. Okay, cool. Right, so the maximum elevation is between 80 to 100 degrees. This thing can aim almost behind itself. That's how high it can arc. It is pretty impressive. And the elevation, on the other hand, it can't aim down for peanuts. So the temptation is always to use these things all the time, simply because they can aim up so well. But whenever enemies get close or they drop below the level of the resting level of the gun, this thing has a hard time firing at them. And it's also not great on craft that roll from side to side a lot, like my craft, despite my best efforts. So yeah, those are the mantlets. The main reason you'd use these two is, firstly, their cost, because they are a wee bit cheaper than these two down here, and a lot cheaper than the Omni Mantlet, but also their size. A smaller mantlet means that armoring around your firing piece is a lot easier, and it means your turret cap ends up being a lot smaller, so that can actually be quite helpful. A lot of the time you don't need a giant field of fire. It helps, but particularly for larger guns, you don't strictly need to aim up at the sky all the time. You should have different weapons able to handle that. So, that's the mantlets. And what you stick on the mantlets are barrels. Various different lengths of barrels, but we'll start with the funky ones. So, you have your standard barrel, which you need to stick on your gun in order for it to meet minimum propellant burn and accuracy. So, if we go over here, barrel length for 0.3 degrees base and accuracy for this gun is 1.82 meters, which is a lot shorter than it used to be in previous versions of the game. That is very helpful, because the noodle barrels are a pain in the butt for many reasons, sometimes literally, and the barrel length for full propellant burn is 3.6 meters, so a little bit longer. So, this is how long the barrel needs to be in order to be 0.3 degrees accurate. So basically it means that the shell will only go off course when in flight by about 0.3 degrees, which is pretty good accuracy, actually. Well, decent at least. The barrel length for full propellant burn is the minimum barrel length you need in order to reach this top speed, the muzzle velocity of, in this case, 487 meters per second. If your barrel is shorter than that, your shell will not get up to this speed, and it'll be slower, which is no good. So, one of the biggest problems you'll find in your craft fighting is that barrels tend to get shot off quite easily, which is one of the reasons why there's more than one kind of barrel. So, the standard barrel right here is it comes in 4 lengths. They're all basically the same. The only difference is the length of them, and the cost scales linearly. So there's no point putting lots of 1 meter barrels when you could put one 4 meter barrel. I pretty much only use this one if I'm placing barrels. But then we have all this. These are heavy barrels, and aside from appearance, they pretty much all function the same way. You have the heavy barrel start, which looks like that. It kind of flares to one side in one direction. So the peg is where it would attach to barrels behind it, and the pin is where it would attach to barrels in front of it. These things are kind of flared like a blunderbuss, so that's purely aesthetic, really. Then you have the regular heavy barrels, which are not flared, and then you have the heavy barrel ends, which are flared the other way, so they get more pointy towards the end of it, and I personally love sticking these on the end of guns because it looks really cool. But why would you use heavy barrels? What's so heavy about them? So, looking at the stats for these barrels, regular barrel is not exactly delicate. It has 350 health, 15 armor, and a weight of 40. And a 4 meter barrel length has 1,400 health, the same amount of armor, and a weight of 160. Keeping that in mind, 350, 1540, 900, 25, 100. So these things, heavy barrels, have a lot more health, a lot more armor, and they are much, much heavier. They're Like, they have over twice the health, and over twice the weight, and almost twice as much armor. So these things are just much, much tougher. So use these things for the main guns of your craft, which you do not want to get shot off, ever. Like, you want to use regular barrels on things that need to track quickly, on smaller guns, which have very short barrels anyway. And because these things are very heavy, and they also don't move quickly because they're so heavy. These things track targets much faster. So, anti-aircraft guns, you definitely want to use these. For gun shooting at big, slow targets, heavy barrels are available for that use. And then you have the two funky barrels, which I quite like because they're funky. First is the bore evacuator. This is a cooler that goes on the gun, it's on the barrel itself. So, the bore evacuator prevents gases from leaking back into the firing piece. It provides a modest reduction in cooldown time, but presents a weak point on the barrel. The effect does not stack. So what that means is, you stick this thing on your barrel, it gives you bonus cooling. As in, your gun can fire, your barrel can cool down faster, you can fire more shells more quickly, and it's just really good. It does not stack though, and it only has the same amount of health as a 1 meter barrel segment. So, you ideally want to stick these things way back here, on the end of your right in front of the firing piece, because if you design your turret well, you are hiding this behind layers of structural material. That is one of the better ways to design a turret cap, because if this is exposed, it gets shot, and if it gets shot, it stops working. Pretty straightforward. Way back over here, that's the bore evacuator. You can actually use a lot of these things. It is actually quite fun to just stack a whole bunch of these things at once. It kind of looks a little weird and fun, but yeah, not recommended if you're going for efficiency. Speaking of efficiency, the muzzle brake reduces recoil, but also slightly lowers projectile speed. So if you stick this on the end of your gun, and it only goes on the end of your gun, by the way, well, yes and no, it kind of... No, wait, it does. It does actually do that. Ah, interesting. I forgot about that. Well, it does attach, I'm not sure, I can't remember if it connects. I have to test that. So basically, this is what happens if you just have too much recoil on your gun, and you don't have enough room to stick recoil absorbers anymore. And if you don't mind your shell being a little bit slower than it otherwise would be, you stick one of these guys on it. They also look kind of cool. Yeah, that's pretty sweet. And then, moving on, we get to railguns. And railguns are a very important feature of advanced cannons, and we'll get a tutorial all unto themselves, especially since I've been playing around with them a bit more, and they're actually really good. They are amazing for getting good mileage out of certain shell types in particular that otherwise you would not otherwise use. So, railguns, how they work. So, first things first, you have the magnet attaching fixture. So, it supplies power from vehicle batteries, which is, in case you're wondering, these things right here. Those are batteries, they hold electricity, and you can charge them with engines, fuel engines, RTGs, or steam engines. Just make sure you have enough to keep them nice and charged. And what these things do is that they attach to the side of the firing piece and allow you to stick barrel magnets on it. So, barrel magnets increase the... Basically, they accelerate cannon shells to a high velocity. Place these on the side of the barrel, or the firing piece rather, with a railgun attaching fixture directly behind them on the side of the firing piece. Each one increases the fraction of vehicle energy available to the railgun that is consumed with each shot. So, you need this in order to have to increase the amount of energy that you can use per shot to accelerate a shell. So, you don't need that many for smaller guns, but if you want to fling big shells, particularly if they only use railgun, electromagnetic propulsion, as in if they're a pure railgun, you'll need a lot of these, so leave space for them. And then, last but not least, you have the railgun charger, and what this attaches to, I believe I mentioned them earlier, they can attach to gauge increases or connectors, or to each other now, which is a really handy feature. These basically transfer energy from the batteries on board your craft and put it into the advanced cannon itself. So, you need these in order for your railgun to function, and you need enough of them that the gun can charge quickly enough in order to fire consistently. So, yeah, these are very important. They're also very delicate. Railgun charges have virtually no health at all, so it's best to hide them below deck whenever possible. The magnet attaching fixture and the barrel magnets are a little bit more robust because you pretty much only have them above deck. Okay, so that's railguns. As I said, tutorial all for themselves. And over here we now have the final two pieces. You have the full shot projector, and that goes on the firing piece, and it displays the predicted travel path of advanced cannon shells. That's pretty much only if you want to fire, if you want to track where the shell goes, and also aesthetically, because this was implemented long before the current system of how you aim a vehicle's guns manually, in which a big crosshair appears on the enemy target, and the guns just lock onto it. So that's basically aesthetic little choice right there. And the laser targeter is far more important. There is a component that you can put on shells called a timed fuse, and it is right here. So what this is that this is a timer. The shell will detonate once the timer has elapsed, so you can set it from anywhere up to 0.05 seconds all the way up to 60. And on its own, it's not very useful. Like, it's just, it will detonate randomly because enemy craft are not going to be nice and stand still for you to quickly manually change this timed fuse in the ammo controller. But what it is useful compared with is the laser targeter, because this changes the time on that fuse in order to ensure that the shell detonates on target. So, go here, allows automatic setting of timed fuse time and altitude detonation parameters. Particularly useful when used by AI, but also works when player controlled. Useful for exploding shells near the target, which may avoid a complete miss. These are, if not essential, then very, very useful for any form of anti-aircraft gun. It's like in real life, you want to fill the skies with flak and fragments. So that is very, very helpful indeed. In fact, with a lot of shells, like adding a timed fuse and a laser targeter, it can do nothing but help the gun a lot of the time. So, very helpful, and that's pretty much all the components. And now on to the practical session, which we will indulge in right now. So, spawn in a fortress, and we will build an advanced cannon using everything that I've just described. So we're just going to place a turret that I made earlier, like so. This isn't going to be an amazing little turret. It's just going to be showing off how these things work. So, little placeholder right there, and we're going to stick the advanced firing piece first. Here it is. Always remember, set minimum accuracy. And we're just going to stick, we're going to make it 1 gauge bigger than it is now. So, right now it's 60 millimeters. Just make sure it's pointed the right way. And the first gauge increase you place doubles that. So now it is 120 millimeters. It's a lot bigger. So now we've done that, we can design the shell a little bit. So I want this thing to use 1 meter shells, simply because that's very easy. And so ammo controller right here, and ammo customizer, 1, 2, go here, and let's see, let's go inertial fuse and stick a high explosive warhead on it. We can make the shell a little bit bigger. So 1 meter shell rack, it says over here, for this 850 millimeter shell. We can make this a little bit longer. In fact, wait, no, I was looking at the wrong thing. Okay, so this is 460 millimeters long. We can make this quite a bit longer, so let's double that length. A little bit more casings, and to start with a shell, about 50% gunpowder and 50% warheads or fuses is a good place to start. You can mess around with that a little bit. So, 120, 1 meter shell rack for this 940mm gun. Okay, well, my 940mm shell. Okay, that's good. It does 900 explosive damage. Good, good, good. Good, 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 good. Ammo cost 44.7 per shell. Reload time 17. Good, that's nice and fast. So, we can go back onto our little gun now that we know what kind of shell it's going to be firing. and we can stick an autoloader on it. So, autoloader, right. We're just gonna stick it up here for demonstration purposes. Right here, and there we go. We have a shell in here. So it has... Now we have a very useful little UI that pops up once we've got a shell loaded. You see the gauge, you see how many how many shells are available. You see the shell speed, which is currently 0 meters per second because we don't have a barrel attached to this thing. You see the inaccuracy, it's very inaccurate because again, no barrels. You see the recoil force and the average recoil per second, and you also see the absorption of recoil and how much it regenerates per second. So currently the recoil is fine. We don't need to add any recoil absorbers just yet. And the firepower is 0.27, which is pretty bad because this thing has a lousy rate of fire at the moment. How many uses per second is also very low because again, very slow rate of fire. The rate of fire, as of right now, is 3.5 rounds per minute. So there's 17.11 seconds between each shot, and that is because there's multiple limits on here. Building an advanced cannon is all about balancing the amount of autoloaders you have, the amount of ammo intakes you have, and your cooling, just how fast the barrel cools down. So, what we can do here is that first off we're going to stick a mantlet on this. So I'm going to go with this 1 meter elevation mantlet. So now you can see the shell speed is 158 meters per second because the mantlet counts as one barrel length. And if we go back over here, we can see the minimum length of barrel we want is, for accuracy, it's about 2 meters, and for barrel length, it's about 3.5 meters. So we're going to stick a 4 meter barrel on here, right here, here, and boom. So now we've got that full speed of 548 meters per second, quite a fast shell. We've got good accuracy, 0.22 accuracy, that's pretty good. But so we can fire this thing now. So we go here, nice boom, and reloading time is going to take a long time because this takes 17 seconds to reload, which is not great, especially for a gun this small. And this is still pretty small, 120 millimeters is not that big. So how do we get this thing firing faster? So what we do is we look down at the bottom. Hopefully you're watching this in high enough resolution to see what is limiting this thing. Currently the cooling is not limiting it. Well, it is, because the cooling limit is 9.2 rounds per minute, but the autoloader and ammo intake limit is 3.5 rounds per minute. So we need to add more intakes and more loaders. So we'll add another loader right here, whoop, and load that in. So now it's almost doubled. So now it's a 7 rounds per minute, and which is a lot better. We can add a lot more than that. And here's where clips come in handy. You will note that autoloaders are expensive. They are in particular a lot more expensive than they used to be. So a 1 meter autoloader is 200 materials, which is, to give you an idea of that, that is 10 4 meter metal beams. That is a lot of money. But a clip is almost half of that. So not quite half, but is almost half. And when you attach clips to autoloaders, they have their loading time reduced. So currently the loading time on this autoloader is 100%. So it takes the full amount of time to load a shell from here into the firing piece. When you attach a clip to it, that's halved. So what that means is that an autoloader with a clip attached to it can do the work of 2 autoloaders, which is very handy because, and that stacks up to a lot. So if we go here, 1, 2, 3, so 1, 2, 3, force assign all. So loading time modifier is 20% now, clips on 2 sides. What that means is this thing is firing, is loading 5 times faster. So one clip can quite easily replace one autoloader, and because they are a lot cheaper, and also, let's see, on 10810, 8740, they are also a lot lighter than autoloaders. So honestly, there is not a huge amount of point to having a pure autoloader gun. use your clips, because they're lighter, they're cheaper, and they're also tougher. So even this one, 107.5 and 87.40. So use clips. Clips are very nice. And you see the rate of fire now is now 9.2 rounds per minute. If I replace these with autoloaders, it's exactly the same. So do not worry about reducing your rate of fire by sticking clips on instead of autoloaders. Clips are pretty much always better. So don't even worry about that. It's pretty cool. So now what's holding us back now? Because the autoloader and the ammo intake limit is 17.5 rounds per minute, but we need more cooling, because the cooling isn't matching that number. You want the rate of fire of a gun to match the highest number imposed by the 3 limits on it, either autoloader, ammo intake, or cooling. So we're gonna stick a cooler on here. How do we do? Okay, that's better. We could do with one more. Yes, now we're just being limited by the autoloaders and intakes. But let's check our recoil. How are we doing? Oh dear. So, the recoil is now 613 per shot, so an average of 179 recoil per second. Our absorption is 766. Okay, that's alright. But the regeneration is 73. The regeneration is 73 per second. So, if this weapon keeps firing, it'll just get progressively more and more inaccurate. So, let's test that. So here, it got a lot more inaccurate, and it's ticking down quite slowly. So, we're going to stick... Well, firstly, we're going to tidy up our autoloaders right here. Well, actually, no, we're not. I changed my mind. We're going to stick one recoil absorber. Well, look at that. So, one little recoil absorber now means that we are now regenerating, basically, recoil, our recoil absorption pool, at 193 per second, which is higher than 179, which is great. It means this gun will basically never lose accuracy through recoil. We also have absorption of 1,566, which is a lot higher than 600, so that's all good as well. So, this thing can keep firing. So now, let's get this to... Let's try and get this thing to about 60 shots per second. Not per second, sorry, per minute. So, we need a lot more autoloaders. 1, 2, 3. And... Whoops. Mirror mode is important. So, lots of stuff. So, let's do that now. So, what do we got here? What do we got? So, it's now 18 rounds per minute. It's being limited by cooling. So, more cooling. So we just add more coolers here. Put the vent splitter in here, because now we can double back. So now the cooling limit is 74.6. And so, in order to get it up to that, we can add yet more autoloaders. Whoop! This is not how you want to design a gun, by the way. Like, ideally you want to hide pretty much all of the explosive or vulnerable bits below deck. So now what do we got? 60 rounds per minute. We've done it. Well, let's check the recoil. Recoil is the same as always, but it's 645 recoil depletion per second, and our regeneration isn't that good, so let's add a few more of these little recoil absorbers. Whoop. Okay, that's already a lot better. Whoop. And now we're almost there. Let's stick them on the back. Whoop. Almost. There we go. So now we're regenerating recoil at 793 per second. And, yeah, so recoil, we're good. Cooling, we're good. Ammo into autoloaders, we're good. We can even stick one more on here, because autoloaders connect to each other. So this gun is a lot bigger than when we started, but it's 120mm. It's all good. So now we've got a rate of fire of 73.6 rounds per minute. And the autoloader limit, the ammo intake limit, and the cooling limit are all very close to each other. And we've got the recoil regeneration and recoil generation is very close together, so it's quite efficient. Accuracy is good, shells are good. So now, let's take this for a spin. Remember to set this. Whoop. And let's turn on God mode just in case. And let's get our friend the Marauder out here. So let's just set this to about 60 per second. It's firing quite merrily, and you can see the recoil absorbing just in time. It's not getting inaccurate, and the shells are being replaced just as fast as they're being fired. It's very nice. So over here the Marauder is already having a pretty bad day. Just turn off its weapons. So it's already lost 5% health. This gun isn't particularly strong. You can get a lot stronger with a stacked high explosive. But yeah, we've made an advanced cannon, and one that is actually doing quite a number on this Marauder right here. So yeah, that's basically it. Like, if you balance... One thing to note about this new update, and it's particularly to do with shells, is that larger shells fired more slowly generally are more efficient than smaller shells fired more quickly now, because of the way stacking works. So if you have high explosive, you could fire 3 shells all with one warhead body, but that is less efficient than firing one big one. In particular, firing shells quickly means you need more cooling, and you also need more recoil absorption, which is expensive and it takes up a lot of room. You also need more autoloaders for that. So firing larger shells means that proportionally you need slightly less cooling and you need less recoil absorption, because one of the ways you could just reduce the amount of recoil your gun generates is just you can manually lower the fire rate. So yeah, that's something important to keep in mind. So yeah, I have no idea what the next tutorial on advanced cannon should be on. Please let me know what you want to see, because I'm looking forward to making it. I'm quite enjoying this update, and I'm quite enjoying the new advanced cannons. The advanced cannons, if you will. So, on that note, thank you all so much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Support me on Patreon if you like, it really helps. Thank you to all my current Patreon supporters, and I will see you next time in From the Depths. Farewell!